This is part 3 of your photosynthesis notes, and in this part we're going to talk about different factors that will affect the rate of photosynthesis, and we're also going to discuss plant adaptations to different environments and how they're able to continue photosynthesis even in adverse conditions. So first, factors that affect photosynthesis. You can look at your graph on page 124 in your book. It gives you a much prettier graph than the ones I have pictured, but one of the things is light intensity. This is how bright the light is. The higher the intensity, the faster photosynthesis will occur until all the electrons are used. Because remember, light powers the breaking apart of water. So a couple of things that will affect this is how readily available is the water. It can only go as fast as there's water available, and that's the electron. So as bright as you can get until you pretty much level off, because you're breaking apart all the water that's available at that point in time. The other thing that can affect it is carbon dioxide levels, and carbon dioxide will also increase photosynthesis rate. So the higher the concentration, the faster photosynthesis will occur, again until the rate will level off. And then you have temperature. Temperature in general, as temperature will rise, the rate of photosynthesis will increase until it gets too warm. And when that happens, the stomata have to close, and then carbon dioxide levels will drop, which will also decrease the rate of photosynthesis, because they have to make a decision. Are they going to dry up, or are they going to make food? And they're always going to choose life over production of extra sugars. So how do plants adapt to adverse environments, or environments where there isn't a lot of water or there's a lot of heat? What happens if they have to close their stomata? That's one way that they adapt to this, is they'll close their stomata. So when this happens, photorespiration is what can take place. Photorespiration. And photorespiration is basically the uptake of oxygen into the Calvin cycle where carbon dioxide belongs. And instead of making a sugar, which they can use, it makes a useless molecule that then the plant has to break down into something else. So the plant doesn't want to do this. So they've created a couple of adaptations to help them overcome this. And they all have this decision they have to make, whether they close their stomata, where they don't get carbon dioxide in, or they leave the stomata open and then they experience much water loss. So two different types of plants are what we're going to discuss. We'll talk about the CAM plants, C-A-M, such as your pineapple, and C4 plants, such as corn. So in CAM plants, they only open their stomata at night. This is when it's much cooler, the sun isn't beating down on them, and then they'll kind of store it into another molecule, and they'll use it later. In a normal plant, let me go back here, in a normal plant, in the C3 pathway, because you have a 3-carbon molecule, rubisco, that comes into play, and it makes a 3-carbon molecule, you'll take in the carbon dioxide and you use it immediately in the mesophyll cells of your leaf, and it immediately goes in the Calvin cycle and makes sugars. But in a CAM plant, you're opening your stomata at night, and then you have to store that carbon dioxide as malate or malic acid inside the cell, in the palisade cells, and then in the daytime it will come back out into the mesophyll cells, a different part of the leaf. It'll transport that malic acid, and it will then go into the Calvin cycle during the daylight time and make sugars as the sunlight is coming in. However, in I've moved my pictures. In C3 plants, what they do is they'll open their stomata during the day. When they can, they don't always keep it open. Like, they don't get as much carbon dioxide in because they only open it during daylight hours as they can. But they'll open it, and then they'll bring it in, and they'll store it in a deeper part of the leaf, in what's called a bundle sheath cell, and it's got more protection. So they'll store that carbon dioxide in another type of molecule, in a 4-carbon molecule, and that 4-carbon molecule is called, never mind, don't worry about it. But it stores it in a 4-carbon molecule, and then when they need to make sugars, they'll actually do the Calvin cycle in that bundle sheath cell farther into the leaf. So they're changing the location of where their Calvin cycle is taking place, whereas CAM, changes the time in which they take in carbon dioxide, and then they can still make sugars during the day, just like the C3 and the C4 plants. So that's all for your photosynthesis notes, except for this diagram here at the bottom, which I'm just moving around so you can see it a little better. And I do want you to take a second and label the diagram so you know what's coming in to each step, what the reactants and the products are. So A, of course, represents sunlight. B is going to represent what's coming into the thylakoid discs, the reactant in that product or in that process, and that's your water. K is representing what water is breaking into in the waste product that's leaving, that's your oxygen. D and E are your NADP and your ADP that are coming into that electron transport chain, and they are getting changed into H and I, which are your ATP and NADPH. Those are your energy molecules that goes into the Calvin cycle. So C represents carbon dioxide as it comes into G, the Calvin cycle, and then L represents those sugars that are made finally at the end of it. So I hope that's helpful to photosynthesis.